Now that we have our scene all set up and our post-processing dialed in and everything good to go, it's time to render this out to a frame sequence on disk. We're in Chapter 3, Level 14. This is where we left off in the last movie, and now it is time to go set this up to render. So as we've done before in previous chapters, we're going to go under Cinematics and open up our Matinee actor. In the upper right-hand corner of Matinee, we're going to click on this movie icon to bring up the Render Movie Settings window. Now we can close Matinee because we don't need that for this. Okay, so we have our capture type. We're going to set this to an image sequence of PNGs for this project, a frame rate of 30 frames per second, and a resolution of 1280 by 720. You notice there's an advanced tab here. There's some other things down here that's enabled texture streaming checkbox. We don't need to worry about that for this because we don't even have that many textures. Some other technical stuff we don't need to be concerned about. Under the general section here, you see it set an automatic output directory, which is a folder within our Unreal project, Chapter 3, called Saved, and then another folder called Video Captures. We can leave that as the default for now, but just so you know, you can set that to whatever you'd like it to be. And under file name format, obviously we have this world.frame syntax here. I've changed it to a dot from the default underscore, and this is just going to write out your frames as the name of your level and then the frame sequence number after whatever separator you choose. We have some more options here in the advanced section just to show them to you, but we're not going to deal with any of that. So you can just leave all that off and as default. And then we'll just make sure cinematic mode is on, and under the advanced tab, all of these things are off. Okay. So one other thing we're going to do before we export is we're going to go over to our world outliner. We're going to select our post-process volume. And down here in the miscellaneous section, we discussed before there's this screen percentage variable here. So I'm going to turn that on, and at 100, that means it's going to render internally at the size that we're rendering out. If we set this to lower than 100, we're going to get a lower quality image that's scaled up. One of the good things about setting this to a higher number is that Unreal is going to render this image internally at a higher resolution and then scale it down on export. And that's going to lead to a higher quality image that we're rendering out. So you can think of this basically as a global render quality setting. So I'm going to set it to 200%. Right now. You can even set it higher depending on your hardware and your setup. You can experiment with how much you can push this system, but we'll do 200 for now just to keep it within a reasonable upgrade. Okay, and now I'm just going to hit Capture Movie. It's going to ask me if I want to save my level, which I do. And we'll let it go. And we can even see in this little window here that the image looks a little bit sharper, a little bit cleaner than it even did in our viewport because it's basically rendering it internally at a higher quality and then scaling it down. Playing back a little bit slower, obviously, because it is rendering at a higher quality and it's writing the frames out. But as any of you who have done a bunch of CG rendering know, this is quite a fast render time compared to typical offline processes. You'll note that we got a little error window that came up there that's saying our frame rate was kind of dropping. And sometimes Unreal will warn you when your frame rate is low for a long period of time because it's just trying to make sure that everything is running smoothly. Obviously, when we're rendering out, we're not really worried about our frame rate at all. If it's a slow frame rate, it doesn't matter because we're not playing a game. We don't need this to be absolutely real time. So those are just things that pop up every once in a while, and you just kind of need to attend to them and ignore them when necessary when they come up. Okay, now we've rendered out our sequence. I'm going to jump over to After Effects, import that image sequence, and we'll take a look at it now that it's been rendered out. Now we're in After Effects. I'm going to go to File, Import File. We'll go to our desktop. We'll go to our exercise files, Unreal Projects, Chapter 3, Saved, Video Captures. And that's where we just wrote out our images. I'll select this first PNG here, make sure PNG sequence is turned on, and hit Import. Okay, you can see we had it set up to import at 30 frames per second, which is what we exported it at. And we have frames 0 through 396. Sometimes the last couple frames that you might expect to have just get trimmed off. It doesn't write all of them. This is just an idiosyncrasy of rendering with a system like this. And you can just compensate by making your animation a little bit longer than you need it to be if you really need to have your exact number of frames. No big deal. So we're going to grab our frame sequence. I'm going to drag it over the Make New Composition icon. And let's just RAM preview this guy. So we can see we have this really nice, clean, crisp CG render that we got out in real time out of Unreal. And we're playing it back as a frame sequence in After Effects. Now we could do additional color correction if we needed to, or integrate this with other elements. And there we go. We've rendered out our motion graphics sequence using the Unreal Engine to a sequence of frames, and now we're previewing them in After Effects.